Greetings, this is English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And this will be our program for March 13th. And in this program, we're going to go traveling, which most of you are probably able to do now as borders open up around the world. Make your plans now because it's going to be pretty hectic out there. People have been cramped up in their homes for so long. They've got cabin fever. And one place you might want to consider going if you're sick of all the common places like Paris and Berlin and London and New York and Tokyo and places like that, maybe you ought to consider going to Romania.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I looked online and saw these pictures and I thought, ooh, I wanna go there. It looks beautiful. It's really green. They have some beautiful small towns that have kind of been preserved. And they're in just terrific shape. Anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about Romania. I think this is the first time we've ever had a unit on Romania.
Yeah, does feel like the first time.
Yeah.
Indeed. And, of course, when you travel to various places in the world, you want to take a scenic stroll through those places,
Sure.
especially if it's a beautiful little village like Brasov in Romania. So let's find out all about Brasov in Romania. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson now one time. Welcome to Brasov, a small town sheltered in the mountains of Romania. While the population is relatively small, the town boasts a surplus of historic curiosities. From the splendid town square to the magnificent peak of Tampa Mountain, there are countless wonders to explore. Council Square. The Council Square, Piața Sfatului in Romanian, is the historic center of Brasov. It's bordered on all sides by red-roofed merchant buildings and ornate churches. In the center of the square sits the Old Town Hall with its large watchtower. This building is now the Brasov History Museum. There you can see objects from Brasov's past, such as stone tools and painted ceramics. If all that history has made you hungry, the Council Square is also the best place to sample the local cuisine. The Black Church. The Black Church, built between 1385 and 1477, is a striking example of Gothic-style architecture. The church gets its name from its dark walls, which were blackened by the Great Fire of 1689. The church houses a large collection of antique rugs and tapestries. It is also home to a 4,000-pipe organ that dates back to 1839. Concerts are regularly held in the church to give listeners a chance to hear this impressive instrument. Music lovers will not want to miss this. Tampa Mountain Cable Car and Brasov sign. Perhaps the best way to experience Brasov is from a higher viewpoint. Hiking up Tampa Mountain takes about an hour, or for a few dollars you can take a leisurely cable car ride to the top. Up on the mountain you can enjoy being surrounded by nature and also appreciate the impressive view of Brasov's architecture below. Tampa Mountain is also proudly decorated by the iconic Brasov sign, which has given Brasov the nickname the Hollywood of Eastern Europe. The sign is lit up at night and can be seen for many miles. These attractions make Brasov the ideal spot to soak up some history. There are free walking tours available throughout the year. No reservation needed. There's no excuse for missing out on all the beauty that Brasov has to offer.
Okay, guys, let's take a look at the title first. Remember, today's our all-English unit. So Tom and I will only be teaching you today. You will not be hearing from the Chinese teacher. So here we go. We've got a scenic stroll. We're going to take a scenic stroll through beautiful Brasov. And I was telling Tom before we started, I looked this up online and I immediately just thought, when can I go? How do I get there? It's so, so pretty. You'll find some good videos online if you go to YouTube. So if you're going to take a scenic stroll, scenic just means really beautiful scenery, something that you usually buy postcards of these scenic views, right? And you send them home to make your friends jealous. This is a scenic stroll. A stroll is just walking along very leisurely. You're not going too quickly. And sometimes, if you have a great vacation, that is, you're strolling a lot. You're not running from destination to destination. I love to do a lot of benching, which I'm making up that as a verb. We would do a bench, or that's the phrase we would use, just to sit and look around at all the beauty in Europe. But this is a scenic stroll where you're walking around, and this is a great place to walk around. There are some hikes you can take, too.
Right. If you've got the time and the money, you can travel all the way to Romania, and you'll have to ask your travel agent how to get there, or you can figure out a route yourself. But yes, indeed, we're taking a stroll, a scenic stroll through Brasov. And welcome to Brasov, a small town sheltered in the mountains of Romania. Okay, so you're in Romania now, and then you're going to go to this small town, which is kind of tucked into the mountains. It says it's sheltered there, which means basically it's surrounded by mountains, just like Puli here in Taiwan. It's high in the mountains, sheltered in the mountains. And while the population is relatively small, the town boasts a surplus of historic curiosities. Now, we probably explained this before in past programs, but the word boast means that it has this thing that it can boast about, it can brag about it. I don't think that people in Brasov are going to be going, hey, look what our town has, It's got this big church, it's got this big mountain. I don't think they're actually doing that, but in this particular case, it just means it has this special feature that you might be interested in. And what does it have? Well, it has these historic curiosities, a surplus of them. A surplus means extra stuff. It has more than necessary. You might have a surplus in your budget, for example, so you can think of new projects to spend the money on.
Oh, wow. To have a surplus in your budget? Sounds impossible these days with the price of things. So, yeah, like Tom said, you can boast as a person and brag about or tell your friends about your achievements and how good you are at something. But here we use boast a lot of times when we're talking about an area that you're trying to get people interested in seeing. So this just means it has that wonderful thing, or it possesses a beautiful feature that you don't want to miss. So the town boasts a surplus of historic curiosities. They really have some beautiful places. So from the splendid town square to the magnificent peak of Tampa Mountain, there are countless wonders to explore. I know online I was watching a couple take a hike up Tampa Mountain. So we'll talk about that later on in the lesson. But yeah, it's a beautiful place to go. I'm afraid as people see it, though, Tom, there will be more and more tourists that descend upon this beautiful little place. I hope it stays nice for a long time.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Everybody's looking for the next best thing in tourism. And as soon as other people discover it, then the place gets too touristy and it's no longer cool to go there. So now's the time to check it out. And from the splendid town square to the magnificent peak of Tampa Mountain, there are countless wonders to explore. That's when we talk about a range of things from something to something. This pattern often occurs when we're talking about certain places that you can travel to. Now, one point of interest in Brasov is Council Square, or the Council Square. You could put the definite article in front of that. The Council Square, Piața Sfatului in Romanian, is the historic center of Brasov. So it's right in the middle of the town. It's probably a good place to start. Again, it's called the Council Square.
I was listening to some history about the Council Square, and during its period where it was under communism or communist rule by the Soviet Union, this Council Square turned into a parking lot. They didn't want the citizens to gather and talk to each other about what was going on.
My goodness.
Yeah, because you don't want to hear the truth when you're being ruled by dictators. So they made it into a parking lot. Once they became free again and were no longer under that communist rule, it turn back into the council square. So there are lots of restaurants and tables and chairs where people sit and just talk with their friends and have some tea or a lunch or dinner. It looks beautiful. So it's bordered on all sides by red-roofed merchant buildings and ornate churches. In fact, if you get a really high view at this, if you're on top of a mountain and look down into Brasov, all you see are red roofs. It's really pretty with the green trees. It's very green there. A merchant is someone who is buying and selling things. We used to use this word a lot before, I would say, the turn of the 19th. We would use it more, 17th, 1800s. As things got more and more progressive, we don't use merchant very often. We talk about vendors these days. He's buying and selling something. A merchant's just a person who is involved in business, usually wholesale. So they will sell their products or trade their products to someone who then stocks them in a smaller area and sells to just one consumer at a time. These are pretty red-roofed buildings. If something's ornate, it's very much decorated. It's not simple and plain. It's really pretty, has a lot of decoration. And back then, when they were building churches in the, way back in the times, even before we had a lot of history from this area, they would spend so much time and money on their churches. So they were very ornate. We're going to be talking about the Black Church in a minute.
We will in the second here, but one more thing we should mention before the break is in the center of the square sits the old town hall with its large watchtower. That's a tower that's very tall, and some guy or whoever goes up in the tower and keeps watch over the town to make sure there are not invading armies and things like that coming. I don't think they probably do that anymore, but the tower still stands, and it is a tourist attraction worthy of your photographs. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a break now, but stay tuned. We'll be right back. And there's no Chinese teacher.
Welcome back, guys. It's our travel unit, and we've decided to take a stroll through beautiful Brasov. It's located in the country of Romania. Romania is famous for Dracula. It's famous for gypsies. And I know personally some musicians who are from Romania who are in New York City. They're just talented folks. So we're going to be looking specifically at a very small, beautiful town called Brasov. And when we left you, we were talking about the Council Square. Now, the Council Square is the historic center of Brasov. Back before we had telephones and social media, in order to catch up with your neighbors and find out what was going on, a lot of people back then would have a meeting planned at a town center, and you do some shopping there, catch up with all the gossip and the news, and that's what this was back then as well. Now, it's got red-roofed merchant buildings and ornate churches that border on all its sides. So there are churches and these beautiful red roof buildings all around. If something borders something else, it means it's on the outside part of it, and then internally or in that a little square or whatever shape it is, you'll find the center and the buildings and where people can sit and chat. This building, or the square itself, has the old town hall. It has a large watchtower where probably military would be up there looking for the bad guys or other countries trying to invade and take over. But now it's just a history museum, and I'm sure you can get a good view if you walk up there.
Indeed, and of course it's now the Brasov History Museum, and there you can see objects from Brasov's past, such as, for example, stone tools and painted ceramics. So that's pottery, things that are fired in a kiln when you form them from clay. That's what ceramics are. If all that history has made you hungry, the Council Square is also the best place to sample the local cuisine. They probably have lots of food stands there for tourists. Do a little more research, though. You might find some more genuine, authentic restaurants. If you look harder, the ones in that square, I suspect, cater to tourists. The food will probably not be really representative of Romanian food. I'm guessing. I could be wrong.
Yeah, on the video I was watching, they were specifically there eating real Romanian food. So they're probably both. They're probably restaurants that would cater to more Western palate or Eastern palate, but they do have real Romanian food there as well.
Hopefully, the food is not overpriced. And the next attraction in Brasov is the Black Church. And the Black Church was built between 1385 and 1477, and it is a striking example of Gothic-style architecture. If something's striking, it really gets your attention. There's the church. It's in Gothic style. Gothic is very ornate, I guess. It's got all those arches and stuff like that. And architecture, of course, is the way you build buildings. Okay, it's the study of planning and constructing buildings.
Right. I bet some of our listeners who are younger have seen folks dress up in a goth style. They'll have these chains or collars around their necks that have spikes on them, and they use a lot of really dark black makeup. I think of vampires when I see this, but it's just a goth look. It also was a style of architecture way back then. But in today's society, it's still popular to be goth. And we call them, he's a goth or she's a goth. But it is, being goth today is a subculture. You like gothic music, and you're very dark and morbid. Morbid means you're fascinated with death. But back then, this gothic style was so ornate. I look at these churches and think, wow, how did they produce such beautiful things back then? We have tools nowadays to do that sort of building, but we don't. Our buildings today are very sleek and modern. I would like to return to some of the architecture of past centuries.
Yep, if you're into Gothic-style architecture, the Black Church is the place for you. And the church gets its name from its dark walls, which were blackened by the Great Fire of 1689. So there was a fire that took place in 1689, and when there's a fire, of course, you get smoke, and you've got all the soot that comes off the flames. This happens in temples here in Taiwan when people burn incense for many, many years. The walls above the incense burner start to turn black. It's a similar concept. So because this church is actually black, well, it's called the Black Church. And also, this church features, or it houses, a large collection of antique rugs and tapestries. So it has these inside there. It houses those things. If something's antique, it's really old. My mother used to tell me that something is antique when it is 100 years old
that's the
or
rule.
more, generally speaking. I think there are exceptions to that sometimes, but in any case, these are just old rugs and tapestries. Rugs are on the floor, and tapestries are pieces of cloth that are on the walls.
They're rugs on the walls, right? They're still beautiful, beautiful rugs, but they're hung from the wall, and sometimes they're very, very long and beautiful. They're expensive. It sounds like our mothers talked about antiques because I grew up with that same rule. It's not an antique stuff unless it's over 100 years old. Minimum, it has to be 100. That might be a rule in America. I don't know. I don't think they need that rule in Europe because they have so many things that are way over 100 years old. Whereas in America, we're kind of a new country. It's hard to find real antiques. Now, this place is also home to a 4,000 pipe organ. That organ has 4,000 pipes, which is amazing. And it dates back to 1839. They hold concerts there regularly, which is wonderful. And typically they're free. When you go to Europe, you could go to a lot of free concerts that are given in churches. They have lots of churches in Europe. And they have beautiful, beautiful concerts with great musicians. So this might be a place for music lovers to check out as well. And if you're wondering if the Black Church still has black walls, it does not. They clean them, but it still holds that kind of nickname, the Black Church.
Okay, very good. And yes, this organ has 4,000 pipes, so it probably has lots of different notes there.
Beautiful.
And different chords. So again, if you're into music, you can hear some organ concertos or things like that. Now, let's move on to another attraction around the town of Brasov. Tampa Mountain, or I should say Tampa Mountain. It's got a cable car, and then there's the Brasov sign there, which is very picturesque, and you can take pictures of that as well. Now, of course, in Florida, in the U.S., we have Tampa Bay, or Tampa, Florida, but I was guessing that in Romania, the pronunciation rules are similar to other Romance languages, so I read it as Tampa. And this is a mountain, and there's a cable car that goes up there, just like we've got cable cars here in Taipei that go up to Maokong, or cable cars around Sun Moon Lake that take you over to that Aboriginal theme park.
I love that because you can get a really great view if you're in one of the cable cars. Here, you can also, I think we call it the gondola, don't we here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call it the gondola. You can call them gondolas or cable car. If you're in Europe and you say gondola, they think you're referring to a very thin kind of boat. Where a couple of people can sit in it and usually have somebody at the front and back trying to steer the ship or steer the boat. But cable car, gondola are both good. Perhaps the best way to experience it is from a higher viewpoint. Yeah, I would recommend that, having watched this video. When you get up high, you can look over and see so much. It's nice to get that sort of view from high up. And the viewpoint is usually the best viewpoint in this area, at least, is the Tampa Mountain. So you can hike up the Tampa Mountain. Takes about an hour. I was watching a couple who hiked up the mountain. They're young and in good shape. But they stopped and chatted a little bit, and it took them an hour and 10 minutes. So you can either hike the whole way. It's kind of switchbacks, guys, which means it's not easy. You don't get much of a rest. Or you can just take the cable car up and down. So they chose to hike up and take the cable car down. You need to go early because it gets kind of crowded from what I see. Now, if you talk about taking a leisurely ride or a leisurely walk or stroll, it just means you don't have to be there at a certain time. You're doing it to relax and to enjoy yourself. I know some people who go on vacations, they have all of these places they want to see, and you run from one place to another. And it's exhausting. That's not how I like to vacation. So I know which friends to go to which countries with. You know, some friends, they like, to hike every day, and some friends would rather stay and do shopping. So make sure you go with like-minded friends who like to vacation the way you do.
There are endless possibilities of places to go check out, so you need to decide where you're going to go and how many places you're going to go see and how much time you're going to spend on each of them. And all of this has to be factored into the time you're spending there. Great if you've got 2 or 3 months to explore this town. Take your time, do what you want, but if you've only got maybe 2 or 3 days, you're going to be on a rather tight schedule. So if you're going to take your time, well, then you can take a leisurely cable car ride to the top. And up on the mountain, you can enjoy being surrounded by nature and also appreciate the impressive view of Brasov's architecture below. This is all fine. Some people like to do this. They like to go above where they're visiting and get a view. I probably wouldn't do this myself. I'd probably rather spend time walking around the streets of this town, doing some sketches or photography or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe talking to people. If you've been on one mountain, you've been on them all, basically. Basically, that's how I sort of feel about it. But it's up to you. And indeed, you can be surrounded by nature there, and you'll have some impressive views of the architecture below. Wow, look at those houses down there with those red roofs surrounded by all those green trees. That's amazing.
Now, we're talking about hiking up this mountain and being closer to this iconic Brasov sign. They put it on the mountain. High up. It's up higher than the Hollywood sign in LA, if you've ever seen the Hollywood sign there. You cannot hike up to the Hollywood sign. It's illegal. But you can hike up to this one, although you can't see it once you hike the mountain. So the best view is actually from below and not once you get up there at the top. If you call something iconic, we often use this to say it represents a particular period or era or even genre. For example, I would say that Elvis Presley was an icon of rock and roll. We look to him. He kind of set the pace for rock and roll and its start. Well, this is an iconic Brasov sign, so when you see it, you know where you are. And it has given Brasov the name, or the nickname, just kind of a fun one, the Hollywood of Eastern Europe. So the sign is lit up at night, so you can see it at night when everything's dark. And it can be seen for many miles around from where it is. So that's kind of cool, too.
If you're into that sort of thing, personally, in looking at the pictures, I think it makes the town look kind of tacky. I think they should not have put it up there. If you're into signs on mountains, yes, go to Hollywood, or better yet, you can go to Keelung here in Taiwan because there's a big Keelung sign above the harbor there that you can check out.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, that might be good enough to check out. I kind of wish it was written in Chinese rather than in English.
Oh.
But in any case, it's a personal preference. But in any case, again, if you go up there, you can get this impressive view of the architecture below, and you can see that iconic Brasov sign. And therefore, we've got this nickname, the Hollywood of Eastern Europe. The sign is lit up at night and can be seen for many miles, as we've said. Maybe you can get some pictures from the town. Now, here's the final paragraph. It says, these attractions make Brasov the ideal spot to soak up some history. Yes, it's in an older part of Europe. Well, Europe is all pretty old, so they've got these old buildings still standing. You can check out the History Museum and look at these old structures and talk to some people there. So you can really soak up and enjoy the history of the place and transport yourself to another time and place.
Yeah, so there are free walking tours available throughout the year, and you don't even need to make a reservation, which is awesome. I wonder if they have a guide, though. If they're free walking tours, I doubt they have a tour guide. I like to have a tour guide when I go on these walking tours. You just learn so much more, and it just seems to be a better use of my time than me walking around with nothing. So there's no excuse, it says, for missing out on all the beauty that Brasov has to offer. Well, there is one excuse. It might be too expensive to fly right now. So that's keeping a lot of people home, I know. You're going to have to save a little longer, I think, in order to go. But I think this sounds like a wonderful place to check out. Maybe you have a plan to go to another country in Europe. Maybe this is the time you just tack on this additional trip to Romania, so you get a chance to see it. And because who knows when we'll be back, right? It's hard to go on these very long trips. They're quite expensive. And if you have kids, it's even more expensive, unless you can leave them home and just go as a couple. But anyway, yeah, this is a place I would so recommend. The food looks good, and I understand for those of you who like beer, they have some different kinds of Romanian beer that are very unusual.
Of course, this is a small town in Romania. You might be satisfied with just going to the largest city, Bucharest, but we don't have time to talk about that today. And that does bring us to the end of our discussion for today. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your trip to Romania if you go, and please come back and tell us all about it. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.